Julius felt the blood rush to his fingertips as he pressed his keycard to the brass sensor and watched the glass doors of the Grand Azure Austin glow a soft green, then stay stubbornly shut, because a person, not a lock, stood in his way. His wife, Miranda, set her sequined shawl just so over one shoulder and blocked the entrance with a smile he knew too well. The one she saved for moments when she believed she was in control and wanted everyone to notice it, including their son, Caleb, who leaned close and whispered, "Dad, please don't embarrass the family," as if Julius were a stranger who had wandered off a bus and up to the wrong hotel. Beyond the glass, the lobby poured light across marble floors he recognized by the faint blue veins in the stone. The chandelier dropped in a slow cascade like frozen rain, and the long front desk carved from quartz that caught every reflection like a lake at sunrise. All of it familiar in the way a house is familiar when a man has walked its halls at midnight and listened for what needs fixing. Yet here he stood, with his own name unspoken, while his wife glanced over his plain charcoal suit and said in a quiet voice made for country clubs, "You can't seriously think you're coming in dressed like that. The tasting menu alone costs more than your check." A sentence that fell soft and sharp at once. And Julius kept his face still because he had learned long ago that a calm face could carry a heavier truth than a loud one. He looked up past them to the ceiling mural, painted with a Texas sky that turned from pale rose to deep azure along a brush line he had insisted the artist soften. Looked to the framed art along the back wall. Local painters he had chosen for their grit and their light. And he breathed in the faint scent of cedar and citrus drifting from the diffuser blend he had approved on a warm spring afternoon. Details that told him this building was running like a clock, even if the front step had become a stage for a small family show. Caleb's jaw was tight, the way it always went when he thought he was being protective, and he murmured again, "Dad, please, we already told people you weren't feeling well." And Miranda followed with, "Yes, sweetheart, we have everything handled. Go home and rest. We don't want surprises tonight." As if Julius were a child who might tip a tray, though it was his birthday dinner, and his hands were steady after a lifetime of work that taught a man patience. And he felt the edge of an envelope in his inner pocket, heavy cream paper, crisp fold, a deed he had planned to hand over later as a quiet sign that love could still be generous, even when respect had run thin. A valet trotted by with a luggage cart full of pale leather cases, the wheels whispering on stone, and the doorman half-turned, waiting for a cue that did not come, because Miranda kept her place and the sensor light cooled back to amber, and Julius stood there in the warm evening air, 70 years old, shoulders broad, a man who had poured concrete under July suns and kept companies alive through winters of thin cash. Thinking how strange it was to be treated like a beggar at a door he had paid for twice, once with money and again with years. And he said in a voice as even as the lobby floor, "It's my dinner." Not angry, not pleading, just the fact of it. But Miranda shook her head with a tinkling laugh that did not reach her eyes and said, "Which is why we can't have any scenes, darling. We invited important people." And she nodded toward the list on the brass stand. Law firm owners, a bank vice president, a newspaper couple. Names Julius knew for reasons his wife could not guess, and the oddness of the moment pressed a little harder, because he could see each of those names paired with a line in his memory. A lease approved, a credit committee persuaded, a scholarship offered to someone's niece who worked nights and studied days. A breeze slipped along the portico and lifted the corner of Miranda's shawl, and the lights caught the beads like tiny stars. And Julius thought of all the times he had arrived home to silence and light meals. How he had never hung plaques on their walls, never brought brochures at the breakfast table. How he had chosen quiet while building something that did not need to shout. And now the quiet was being mistaken for weakness. Caleb cleared his throat and tried again. "Dad, honestly, this is not the place." And Julius let his eyes rest on his son's face, the same eyes he had carried to high school games, to the emergency room when a wrist broke on a bike, to graduation day in a suit bought with cash and pride. And he wondered when the boy learned to lower his voice around servers, but raise it with his father. Wondered who taught him that the world cared more for shine than for weight. And he said only, "I won't embarrass you." because there was no point in arguing titles on a sidewalk, not yet. A couple stepped around them and slipped in, offering a quick apology smile that said they knew awkwardness when they saw it, and the pianist inside moved from one gentle song to another, so soft the notes seemed to float in a cool current under the talk. Miranda shifted closer and lowered her voice further. "The VIP floor is for distinguished guests, Julius. Please don't make me ask you again." And Julius felt the pulse in his fingertips calm, as if a switch had been thrown. Felt the little tremor in his hands stop, because the decision inside him had finished forming. He would not step back from a door he had paid to open. Not tonight, when the years had finally lined up behind him. Not when the people in that lobby knew his face and his habits, even if his own family pretended not to. He set his palm flat against the cool glass and saw, faintly, his reflection beside the faint reflection of his wife's certainty. And in the middle of those overlaying shapes, he noticed a familiar figure striding toward them from the desk, with a purposeful ease that felt like a promise kept. A broad-shouldered man with silver at his temples and a discreet earpiece. A man who had walked midnight rounds on rainy nights and stood at his left shoulder during tough conversations with people who believed rules were for other folks. A man who never raised his voice because he seldom needed to. And as Julius met that steady gaze through the door, the lobby scent, the lights, the art, the stone, the music, all threaded into a single line that ran straight to this second, and then outward to whatever came next. And the door sighed open on its hydraulics, and my security chief approached the door. Chief Ramos stepped through the open door with calm steps, the kind of calm that settles a room before words even start. And he gave a small nod to Julius as if they were simply resuming a conversation paused moments ago. He said, "Good evening, Mr. Lane. Your table is ready. The tasting is waiting for your approval." And the way he said it, steady and respectful, made the lobby staff shift in that quiet wave of attention that happens when the person in charge appears without noise. Miranda's smile froze at the edges, and Caleb's whisper dried up halfway, because the scene no longer fit the story they had told themselves on the drive over. The story about a retired man on a fixed income who would not belong in a room like this. And Julius answered with a small, "Thank you, Chief," that carried the gentle weight of habit. Then he turned to his wife and his son and said, "Come inside, please." Not as a threat, not as a plea, but as an invitation to step into the truth. He moved first, because a man should not ask others to go where he will not lead, and the doorman, who knew the names of every night porter and where a tired guest would lean in the lobby when the taxi was late, held the door wider with a quick, respectful, "Welcome back, Mr. Lane," which carried across the marble like a bell. Inside, the scent of cedar and citrus rose clean and light. The pianist touched a softer key, and the front desk manager lifted her head with bright eyes and said, "Happy birthday, sir," while her hands kept moving like she was holding the thread of a busy night and would not let it tangle. Miranda glanced around as if the furniture had shifted a half-inch when she was not looking, as if the chandelier had lowered itself to hear better, and she said in a thin voice, "Why are they greeting you like that?" But Julius did not answer yet because he did not want a fight at the carpet's edge. He wanted movement. And movement he had, because Chief Ramos guided them toward the executive lift with his easy stride and said to the concierge, "Alma, inform Chef that course 1 will fire in 2. And Alma gave a small salute with her pen, already smiling because she loved it when the timing worked just right. At the lift, Julius reached into his jacket and took out the brass key that only a few people carried, and the sensor blushed green. And Miranda stared at the key like it was a trick card, and Caleb leaned in and whispered, "What is going on?" And Julius said, "We will talk upstairs," because he wanted the words to land at a table where faces could settle and plates could anchor them. The lift hummed up, and while it rose, Julius let his eyes rest on the glass, where the lobby shrank to a lake of light, and he let himself think in plain steps how this all began. Not as a jump back in time, but as a line that ran under his feet even now. There had been a season when people called him finished, when the oil slowdown bent his small construction outfit until bolts squealed and finally gave, when he sold trucks that had carried his name and bought a second-hand desk above a feed store in Hutto. when Miranda told neighbors he was retired, stretching the word like gum, and Caleb learned to joke about discount coupons and early bird specials. And Julius kept his mouth shut and wrote numbers on a yellow pad until the pages wore thin. He had seen an old motel on the frontage road, a stained and noisy place that smelled like rain in the wrong way, and he bought it because the price was low and the bones were good. And he cleaned it room by room with two men who needed a second chance, switched the buzzing sign for one that did not lie, hired a night manager who understood trouble and kindness in the same breath, and called a pitmaster to set a smoker in the back lot on Saturdays so the place would smell like welcome. And the rooms started to fill, and the cash started to breathe. And he sold it not for glory, but for a seed. And with that seed, he bought two more, and then a third. And then he formed a company with a quiet name and a lawyer who knew how to keep noise away. And he rolled his sleeves and learned how a lobby teaches you where to put the chairs and how a hallway tells you if the carpet can swallow noise. And he met bankers who respected silence and spreadsheets more than outfits and jokes. And he learned how to carry debt like a beam and not like a chain. The lift doors slid open to the mezzanine, soft carpet underfoot, glass rail reflecting the chandelier like a river, and the private dining room stood open, a long table set with bone china and silver that did not brag, bluebonnets in low bowls like little hills, napkins folded clean, and Julius watched the line cooks pause just enough to see who came in, then return to their dance. And Chef Martinez, tall and bright-eyed, lifted a hand and said, "Course 1 is ready, sir." And Julius said, "Thank you, chef." And he guided Miranda and Caleb to their seats, and he saw the small tremor in Miranda's hand as it touched the chair back. And he heard the way Caleb swallowed before sitting, because something in them already knew the shape of the answer, even if the words had not been spoken yet. Staff moved with care, bowls set down like gifts, chilled corn velouté with pickled shrimp and a thin line of jalapeno oil that glowed green and honest. And Julius lifted his spoon and tasted summer fields and kitchen heat and a memory of his mother's voice. And then he said, "You told me I should not embarrass the family." And his tone was still even. "But I think the only shame in a room like this is how people treat those who serve." And he looked at Caleb, who could not hold his father's eyes for more than a second, and then back to Miranda, whose chin had that old tilt that meant she was choosing a story and might not let it go. Before either could answer, a trio of guests paused at the door. The kind of guests Miranda had pointed to downstairs, owners of a law firm who liked their names in announcements. And they blinked when they saw Julius at the head, then smiled with true relief, because they had been trying to reach the decision maker for weeks and had not understood why their calls never found him. And one said, "Mr. Lane, may we send over a bottle to celebrate?" And Julius nodded once and said, "Thank you, but send it to the kitchen." And the men's smiles widened because they understood the signal and also the respect it carried. Alma slipped in to murmur that Miss Patel from Lone Star Bank had arrived and wished him a blessed birthday. And Julius said, "Seat her near the window. We will speak after course 2. And all of this unfolded in clear steps while Miranda and Caleb sat inside a silence that hummed. And the mystery did not come from tricks. It came from the simple truth of a man they thought they knew, standing where they never pictured him. And the truth was only getting started. Julius reached for the envelope in his jacket and placed it beside his plate without opening it. A small promise to himself that he would still give from a place of strength and not from hurt. Then he looked at his family and said, "I asked you in because this is my house and because I want you to see how a house is kept." And as he spoke, the room breathed with him. The staff watched with that gentle pride that rises when a leader is known in the right way. And the pianist below brushed a new melody through the air. And the night in Austin leaned against the windows like an old friend listening at the screen door. Julius finished the first spoon of the chilled corn velouté and felt the room settle around him like a jacket that finally fit. The bowls came back up on silent palms, and as the staff flowed out, Alma slid to his shoulder with a small note and a voice just above a whisper. "Sir, Miss Patel from Lone Star Bank has arrived, and the Anderson firm partners are also asking if they may greet you." And the way she said, "Sir," told Miranda and Caleb more than any speech could have said. Miranda adjusted her napkin with fingers that were too careful, and Caleb leaned in, his voice thin. Chairman? They called you chairman downstairs? Is that what you are? And Julius kept his eyes on his son so the answer would land where it should. Yes, chairman of Azure Hospitality, owner of this building and the ones that look like it, he said plainly, without drama, because the truth did not need stage lights. Chef Martinez stepped in with course 2, paper-thin peaches with smoked pecans and goat cheese from the hill country, set the plates with a small nod at Julius, then retreated, leaving citrus and summer in the air. And while Miranda's fork hovered, a trio of lawyers paused at the doorway, faces bright with the relief of finally finding the person with the pen. Mr. Lane, said the older one, we've been trying to reach your office about renewing our lease in your Congress Tower. We'd also like to discuss 2 additional floors if possible. And Miranda blinked quickly, remembering the same men downstairs as distinguished guests, and hearing now that their distinction had been walking around inside Julius's files all year. Julius did not flex or gloat. He simply said, please speak with Nora on Monday. Bring your rent roll and your staff plan. We will make terms that fit your people as well as the floors. And the men thanked him twice and backed out, the way men do when they have entered a room and found the center of gravity. Miss Patel slipped in next, medium height, calm eyes, the look of someone who did not waste meetings, and she said, Chairman Lane, happy birthday. We appreciate your trust with the Houston refinance, and I'm here to offer a rate that protects your healthcare line during downturns. And Julius nodded once and pointed to the empty chair by the window. Sit after this course. We will speak. And she smiled because he had placed her where the evening light would show sincerity and not just numbers. Caleb's voice broke the small bubble. Dad, why not tell us? Why act small at home? And Julius set his fork down and folded the napkin on his thigh. Because noise takes energy, and I needed that energy for work. Because I wanted to be sure the house I was building could stand before I hung a sign on it. And because I was learning how to be a leader who does not need applause, he said, simple as a level placed on a beam. He let the next plates arrive before saying more. Let the rhythm of good service carry them, so words would not feel like blows. The door opened again, and Mr. and Mrs. Harper from the city papers walked in with quick steps and open faces. Mr. Lane, your apprenticeship program changed how our readers think about hospitality. We'd like a deeper profile, said Mrs. Harper, and Julius nodded. Speak to Alma. She will put you with Miguel, who runs the night shift training. He will show you the real story. And that answer, too, put another small crack in the old picture Miranda had held of her retired husband. Miranda watched the room change around her. Case watched people who once sat at her table and humored her small jokes now turn their shoulders a few degrees toward Julius as if drawn by a quiet magnet, and her voice dropped. I told people you were on a fixed income, she said, not challenging now, only naming the thing. And Julius did not wince. Then you can tell them you were mistaken, he said, and he did not make her say more because there would be time for longer talk later. Alma returned to place a hand near Julius's plate. Sir, the florist increased tonight's invoice by 20% last minute. Shall I approve? And Julius glanced at the bluebonnets set low along the table, at the ranunculus set like soft lamps, and said, No, pay the original plus a fair rush fee. Remind them that our events team brings them steady work all year. And Alma smiled because he had once again chosen fair over show. Course 3 gave way to Course 4, braised short rib with ancho and hominy. And with it came Mr. Owen from a venture fund, talking about a San Antonio anchor tenant and night economy. And Julius let him talk for 30 seconds before asking 2 questions that cut to the bone. Do your returns require cutting staff hours after quarter 2? Do your models account for the bar down the block that feeds shift meals to our dishwashers? And Mr. Owen answered poorly at first, then better, then said he would return with a plan that did not treat people like parts. And Julius nodded, because this was the kind of conversation he liked best, the kind that turned money from a pressure into a tool. When the plates cleared, the mezzanine hushed for a breath, as if the building itself had taken in what had been said. Caleb rubbed his forehead and let out a small laugh that wasn't happy. I told my friends you collected coupons, he said, and they believed me. And Julius reached across and touched the edge of his son's water glass with one finger, a small, steady tap. Start again tomorrow. Find the housekeeper who worked your prom night and learn her name. Begin there, he said. And Caleb's mouth tightened in the way it did when he got an instruction he did not like, but knew was right. Miranda finally tasted the short rib and closed her eyes at the first bite, then opened them with something like grief, not for food, but for the years spent listening to her own fears. You built this and let me talk, she said, and Julius answered, I built this and hoped the rooms would teach us all. And it was not a clever line, only the truth of how he had always believed a space can change a person who lets it. Miss Patel took the window chair then, as invited, and in 3 clear sentences sketched a refinance that would tighten cash now and loosen risk later. And Julius said, approve with the healthcare covenant. And she said, yes, sir, and stood to go. And before she left, she looked at Miranda as if to say plainly, he is exactly who he sounds like. And then she was gone. Across the room, Ramos watched the floor the way a captain watches weather. And when a small group of late arrivals grew too loud near the door, he was already there, moving them with a soft hand and a nod, saving the room from a ripple that could have become a wave. Julius caught his eye and lifted his chin in thanks. Course 5 slid in. River trout with charred lemon. And as plates landed, the pianist downstairs changed songs, and the first notes drifted up like a breeze off the river. And Julius thought about the envelope in his jacket, the deed to a small ranch west of town, Lev Oaks, water, a place to learn gentleness again. And he decided he would not give it yet, not as a prize, but later as a promise. He looked at Miranda and Caleb, at the way their shoulders had dropped from tight to human, at the way their eyes moved now, taking in staff names on nameplates, the timing of trays, the way Chef watched the room as well as the stove. And he felt the mystery of the night settle into a new shape. Not, how did he hide this? But how did we not see? And in that new question, there was space for the rest of the evening to open. One course at a time, one truth at a time, with the whole building listening. Julius let the trout course clear, and then stood, telling Miranda and Caleb with a small nod to follow, because the next part of the evening needed to happen where the real work lived. He led them through a narrow door by the sideboard that most guests never noticed, into the service corridor where the carpet gave way to rubber mat. The hum of the building grew louder, and the smell shifted from perfume and candles to onions, soap, and warm metal. The change in air felt like truth, and he wanted them inside it. Chef Martinez met them at the swinging door with her sleeves rolled, her eyes bright with the good rush of a kitchen in rhythm. Course 6 is on the passin' too, she said, and then lowered her voice. Also, host just flagged an allergy card for table 9, tree nuts. They already had the peaches with pecans. No reaction, but they're worried. And Julius did not frown or look around for someone to blame. He said, pull the card, remake dessert without nuts, and send a note from you explaining cross-contact steps. Comp the table and send 2 staff meals home with them for tomorrow. And Chef nodded, already turning to her sous, already shifting the line with quick words that snapped and soothed at once. Miranda stood just inside the door with her hands wrapped around her clutch, not sure where to look, while Caleb watched the cooks like he was seeing choreography for the first time. Hands setting pans, steam lifting, plates wiped, a clock with 10 hands all keeping the same time. Julius walked them past the dish pit where hot water moved over plates like rain, and a young man with a sleeve tattoo looked up and said, "Evening, Mr. Lane," with the tired pride of someone who knew his part mattered. And Julius said his name. "Evening, Diego. How's your sister?" And Diego's mouth curled into a slow smile. "She got the acceptance," he said. "Nursing school." And Julius touched the metal edge of the station once, a quiet blessing, and said, "Tell her the scholarship fund will cover books. Alma has the forms," and moved on. At the end of the hall, they passed engineering, where 2 techs watched a wall of small screens showing boiler temps, chiller loops, and door sensors like a heartbeat. One screen pulsed amber. "Freezer 2 is creeping up," said the older tech without looking away. Julius stepped in. "How long?" 7 minutes above target, the tech said. "Compressor cycling too often." And Julius said, Swap to backup now, log the swing, and call the vendor for dawn. Anything stored high risk? Gelato base and lamb trim, the tech replied. And Julia said, move the base to 3, tag the trim for staff meal, not service. Note waste if needed. And the tech nodded, already on his radio. Miranda stared at the screens as if they were telling fortunes, and then her eyes softened because she could see finally that this building was not a stage, but a living thing that needed care every minute. Caleb pointed at a chart line. You watch all this every day? He asked, and Julia said, we train people to watch, and we make sure they have what they need. Then we check again. And Caleb nodded slowly, like a man hearing a language he almost remembered. They cut back through the service hall to the staff break room, where a corkboard held photos of birthdays and a handwritten note in Spanish thanking the laundry team for a hard week. A small fridge hummed. A basket of bananas and granola bars sat with a sign, take one now, be strong later. Miranda read the sign twice and whispered, I didn't know you. Did any of this? And Julia said, I didn't tell you. That is not the same thing. And he said it without bite. He stepped to the whiteboard and added in clean block letters. Night team. Coffee at 1 a.m. 2 warm rooms on hold for emergencies. Then drew a small checkbox and ticked it, knowing Alma would smile when she saw the mark. Ramos met them as they re-entered the mezzanine, his radio silent, his posture loose but ready. We handled the noise near the bar, he said. And there's a gentleman from the bank asking if you have a minute. He says he's been trying to book a meeting for months. And Julius shook his head gently. Tonight is for food and family. Alma can give him Tuesday at 10. And Ramos said, yes, sir, and then added very quietly. Miss Lane asked if the valet could keep her shawl inside. I told them to use the staff closet. Seemed kinder. And Julius gave a small half smile that said, good call. They returned to the private dining room as the 6th course landed. Smoked duck with prickly pear glaze, pink and glossy under the lights. And Julius waited until the servers withdrew before he spoke. You asked why I never put my name on the door, he said, looking at Miranda first and then at Caleb. Because doors should open for everyone the same way, whether a name is above them or not. Because I wanted the housekeepers to feel safe asking for a day off. Because if people wanted to praise someone, they would pick the person who cooked their meal or fixed their AC at midnight. My name does not make the pillow softer. And the words were simple enough that they did not need any shine. Miranda stared at her plate, then up at him. I told people you were small, she said again, this time not as a confession, but as a truth that had weight. And Julius said, you told a story that kept you calm. This one keeps the building strong. And he gestured toward the door where another quiet wave of service rolled in to clear and reset. Caleb shifted, a little restless, a little raw. I made those jokes too, he said. I thought it was harmless. And Julius kept his eyes steady. Jokes are rarely harmless when the person who hears them cannot answer back, he said, and let the sentence sit. Alma appeared at his shoulder with a small tablet. Sir, Table 9 accepted Chef's note and asked to thank her. Also, the law firm partners confirmed Monday with Nora. Miss Patel left her card and a blessing for your birthday. And Julius said, thank you, and looked at the clock on the far wall, a clean circle that had marked every quiet victory of the last 3 years. Time to draw a line. He reached into his jacket and took out the heavy envelope, the one he had touched at the door when his fingers were tingling, and set it by Miranda's bread plate. This is a deed, he said. 20 acres west of town live oaks, a spring that runs most years, a small house with a long porch. I meant to hand it to you before dinner, but I wanted to show you this first. Land has a way of making people honest with themselves. We could use that. And Miranda's face folded and opened the way faces do when two feelings meet each other hard, shame and relief. And she put her fingers on the envelope with a careful touch as if it might break. Caleb watched her, then looked at Julius. What do you want from me? He asked, and the question sounded young and old at the same time. Julius said, start by learning 3 names before you leave tonight. The housekeeper who set this room, the porter who brought the ice, and the dishwasher with the tattoo. Then ask each one what would make their job easier. Write it down. Hand it to Alma. We fix what we can in a week. And Caleb nodded, jaw tight because it meant effort, because it meant humility. but he nodded. More guests drifted near, the Harpers returning to say goodnight with eyes that had seen more than they would print. A city councilwoman who had sat quietly at the back coming forward to say the apprenticeship program had reduced calls to her office because young men with tough months had found steady work. And Julius gave credit by name to Miguel and Nora and the night leads. And each time he did, Miranda's shoulders dropped another half-inch, as if the weight she had chosen to carry for years decided it did not belong to her anymore. The pianist downstairs found a slower tune. The lights warmed by a notch. Course 7 came, a small plate of mignardises, 2 bites each, precise and happy. Julius did not make a speech. He said only, "Thank you for feeding us well," to Chef when she stopped by the door to read the room one more time. When the last plates were cleared and the coffee set down, Julius stood again and offered Miranda his arm like he had on younger nights when the world seemed simpler, and she took it, a little unsure but willing, and he led her and Caleb back to the mezzanine rail so they could look down over the lobby. People moved like a slow current, staff rotated, the blue quartz desk shone, the scent in the air stayed clean and calm, and the building gave off that rare feeling hotels sometimes have when they are run with care. A sense that if you arrive tired and wrong in the middle of a bad day, someone here would know what to do. Julius rested his hands on the rail and said, "This is why I kept going." And for a long moment, nobody spoke, because the mystery left in the room was not about money or titles anymore. It was about how a man becomes the kind of person a whole house can lean on without falling. Julius kept his hands on the mezzanine rail a moment longer, letting Miranda and Caleb see the lobby breathe, then guided them back to the table where coffee waited and the small sweets glowed like tiny lanterns on white plates. He did not rush, because the pace of a room teaches people how to feel, and tonight he wanted calm to do the teaching. Alma moved in with a quiet, "Refill?" And Julius nodded once for all 3 cups, then turned to Caleb and said, "Begin now." And Caleb, who had spent years learning management from books and dinner talk, pushed back his chair and went to do something that did not come from a book. He walked to the door, asked Ramos where to find the people who made the room work, and disappeared into the service corridor with a small hotel pen and a folded place card. Miranda watched him go with the look of a woman who had just realized she did not know every corner of her own life. She reached for the deed envelope again, touched the edge, then left it alone as if it needed to sit and cool like fresh bread. Julius sipped coffee, dark and simple, exactly as he ordered it for the hotel, and welcomed the Harpers back when they stepped in to say goodnight. "Tell Miguel you will ride the elevator with him at 2 a.m. one night," he said, and Mrs. Harper smiled because she understood that stories grow truer in the quiet hours. As they left, a thin man in a bright tie hovered by the threshold and tried to catch Julius's eye with the eager look of a salesman finding a door ajar. Ramos reached him first, heard the name Republic Bank, and eased him to Alma with a soft, "Tuesday at 10, sir," while the man glanced past his own shoes toward Julius and nodded as if the appointment had been a prize. Miranda noticed and said in a small voice, "They want things from you." And Julius answered, "Everyone wants things. The work is knowing what to give, when to wait, and when to say no." And he said it like weather, something a person accepts and plans for. Chef Martinez appeared to check the room the way a captain checks a deck, saw plates clean, read faces, and tilted her head with a question. Julius raised 2 fingers to say, "Perfect," and she slipped away to release the line for cleanup and crew meals. Caleb came back then, a little out of breath, holding the place card like a ticket. "Rosa," he said, "housekeeper." She set the room. She asked for lighter carts on the 12th floor because the carpet grabs the wheels near the corner by the glass. Tomas, porter. He brought the ice. He wants a rubber mat at the loading dock because the paint gets slick after rain. Diego, dish pit. He asked for better insoles in the supply cabinet and a stool he can use between rushes so his back stops burning at 2 a.m. And he put the list by Alma's tablet and added, "Please," in a voice that lacked polish but had something better, effort. Alma Reed wrote 3 tasks and said, "By Friday," like a promise to herself. Miranda's eyes were wet, not the big showy kind of tears, but the quiet kind that come when simple requests pierce through years of noise. She said, "I could have asked those questions," and Julius said, "Yes," without judgment, and let the word stand as a bridge instead of a fence. A small ripple of talk rose at the far end of the room, the kind that warns of a stumble, and Ramos was already there, steadying a guest who had caught a heel on the carpet border. He smiled, checked the ankle, and guided her to a chair, and the moment passed like a wave that breaks and then smooths. Republic Bank's Mr. Harrison tried one more approach, stopping just inside the door with a glossy folder halfway raised. Julius looked at Ramos and shook his head once, and Ramos, who had served in a dozen kinds of weather, stepped into the space with a friendly hand and a line that saved everyone's face. "Sir, the chairman keeps business on business days. Tuesday will be a better day for both of you." And Mr. Harrison, who was not a fool, let the folder fall closed and thanked him for the kindness of an honest boundary. Julius turned to Miranda and said, "A hotel has rules that are not printed." And she nodded, seeing them at last. The pianist below slid into Blue Moon of Kentucky, slow and tender, and a couple in the lobby swayed in place. Not a dance, exactly, but the beginning of one. Julius lifted his cup again and felt the room's hum shift from surprise to acceptance, the way a horse settles after the first mile. He checked his watch, checked the faces, and made a small decision that would matter to people who would never sit at this table. He called Alma over and said, "Every night this week, give ride vouchers to the closing crew if the bus is late. Call the vendor about the lighter carts tonight. Put a mat on the dock before morning. Pull 10 sets of good insoles from stores. I'll approve the charge." And Alma wrote fast and said, "Yes, sir," and then added on her own, "We'll test a different wheel on 12, because she understood how to carry a torch without burning the hand." Miranda exhaled like a woman coming up from deep water. "I told a friend last month that you were clipping coupons," she said, "and I heard myself say it, and I did not stop." And Julius set his cup down. "Then tell her this week that you learned the names of 3 people who work after midnight, and tell her why the mat on the dock matters." And Miranda nodded, because a better story needs a teller. Caleb's phone lit up on the table with a friend's name. He flipped it face down and kept his focus where it belonged. A server came to top off water, and Miranda looked up at her name tag. "Thank you, Lila," she said. And the server smiled with surprise that melted into pleasure. And Julius saw the small change in his wife's shoulders, a shift off a sharp angle to something truer. The door opened again, and the city councilwoman stepped in. This time alone, no staff, just a paper folded in her hand. "Chairman Lane," she said, "we approved the zoning variance for the East Side Training Kitchen. The neighborhood board asked me to say thank you for hiring from the block and keeping the music nights." And Julius said, "Tell them the music keeps the kitchen honest." And she laughed and tucked the paper away. Alina from events slipped in behind her with a crease between her brows. "Sir, the florist is upset about the adjusted invoice. She says last-minute requests require last-minute rates." And Julius said, "Bring her to me." And when the florist arrived with fast words and a smart jacket, he let her speak all the way through. Then said, "Your arrangements are beautiful, and you will get steady business from us all year because you show up for small rooms when others won't. We will pay the original plus a fair rush fee. Next time, call me before you double. I would have simplified the flowers instead of cutting the integrity of the bill." And the florist blinked, then nodded, and the crease left Elena's brow. Julius watched the clock and made another small call that would ring loud in the right places. "Ramos, once the last guest leaves, release the crew on time. No hero shifts. The hotel must be strong tomorrow, and the people must be strong to make it so." And Ramos answered, "Yes, Mr. Lane," with the light in his eyes that appears when a leader gives permission to be human. Dessert plates emptied, coffee cooled, voices softened. Julius stood, not to grandstand, but to make one clean line on the night. "Thank you for coming to eat with me," he said to the room. "The bill is on the house." And then, with a half smile that never loved microphones, "My house." And a small laughter rolled out, not the awkward kind, but the warm kind. And shoulders loosened another notch. He shook hands, he said names, he set Tuesday for business, and left tonight for belonging. When the last guest waved from the door and the pianist closed his lid, Julius looked at Miranda and Caleb and said, "Walk!" And they moved together back to the rail, watching Alma release the night crew, two at a time, with a pat on a shoulder and a "rest now." And Caleb said very quietly, "I see it." And Julius said, "Keep seeing it." And the mystery that had begun at the door. How could a man be small and also hold a whole building, resolved into a thing simple and difficult at once? He had chosen where to be large, and he had stayed there long enough for the walls to learn his name. The room had softened into a warm hush when a small chirp sounded from Ramos's radio. Not loud, just sharp enough to cut the calm. He touched his earpiece, listened, and gave Julius a look that said there was a problem but not a disaster. Julius stood without fuss and said to Miranda and Caleb, "Walk with me," because he wanted them to see the building handle stress the way a good horse takes a hill. They reached the foyer as Ramos met them halfway. Voice low, elevator 2 stalled between 9 and 10, 2 guests inside. One is elderly, no panic yet. Engineering is on it. Spa called about a smoke sensor blink, but no smell. I sent Luis to confirm. And Julius nodded, already moving. They stepped to the bank of elevators where a discreet service cart waited, stocked with bottled water, small fans, and towels. Things most people never noticed because they were there only when needed. Julius pressed the call button for the service phone, spoke into it with a steady tone. "This is Mr. Lane. We are right here with you. Help is on the way. How are you feeling?" And a woman's voice came back, shaky but trying to be brave. "Fine, I think. My mother is with me. She is 83 and a little frightened." And Julius said, "We're going to open this car slowly. You'll be safe. I'm going to stay on the line until you can see us." And he kept the line open while the engineering team arrived with a small kit and quiet hands. Miranda stood slightly behind him, watching his face as he listened and spoke, and something inside her posture changed, a small tilt from doubt to trust. Caleb watched the techs check the panel, call to the machine room, and coordinate with Ramos's team the way people choreograph a careful lift. After 2 minutes, the doors eased open 6 inches and then a foot. The car paused level with the floor by a clean inch, and Ramos said, "Hold," with his palm out, then, "Now." And the doors slid wide. Inside, an elderly woman sat on the bench, her purse clutched, her daughter holding her hand. Julius stepped back so Ramos could help them out, then came forward to greet them like honored guests. Not problem tickets. "Thank you," the daughter said, breath shaking out of her, and Julius said, "We're sorry for the scare. The rest of your evening will be quiet. Alma will send warm tea and something sweet. We will also adjust your bill. I hope you will sleep well." And the older woman looked up with watery eyes and said, "My husband fixed machinery. He would have liked how you did that." And Julius bowed his head a little, as if accepting a blessing, and answered, "Then we did it the right way." He turned to Ramos. "Run a full cycle on 2 before we return it to service. Post a porter there for an hour." And Ramos answered, "On it," already relaying to the team. Luis came trotting up from spa, shook his head with a smile. Steam from the eucalyptus room, no smoke, sensor blinked and reset. And Julius said, "Thank you," and felt the building relax under his feet, the way a ship feels steadier when a wave passes. They walked back toward the mezzanine and past the bar, where a couple laughed too loudly because relief had a sound, and the pianist below drifted into a gentle melody that fit the new calm. Julius stopped by the front desk and asked the night manager, "Any late arrivals without rooms?" And she said, "1 flight delay, due at 1. And he said, "Keep a pot of coffee and 2 warm cookies for them, no charge." And she smiled because she loved small kindnesses that cost little and felt big. They returned to the private room where coffee had been refreshed and the Mignardizes looked like tiny maps of joy. Miranda let herself breathe and then looked at Julius with open eyes, the kind that asked without words for a path forward. "Why did you never tell me?" she asked in a voice that was not sharp now, only tired, and Julius sat and answered the way he would answer a contractor on a dusty site. "At first, because I was not sure it would work. Then, because I liked quiet. After that, because every time I tried, you were busy telling a different story, and I did not want to argue in our kitchen. And finally, because I thought the building would show you when it was ready." And he lifted a hand in a small circle that meant this night, Miranda folded her napkin and unfolded it again. I was afraid, she said. Afraid of being ordinary, of aging, of not being invited. I talked big so I would feel big. And Julius did not rush to forgive or scold. He simply said, fear makes noise, work makes rooms. And the simple words landed like rain on dry ground. Caleb leaned forward, elbows off the table now, because something about the evening had pushed him into better habits. Dad, I want to fix what I can, he said. Not with money, with time. What would you have me do? And Julius looked at his son for a long moment, seeing the boy who once ran to him with a split lip and the man who had learned to talk down to people with less power. You will shadow the night shift this week, Julius said. All 7 nights, 10 to 6. You will carry ice, change linens, ride the service elevator, clear a drain, walk with Ramos on rounds, sit with engineering at 3 in the morning when the world is very quiet and all the little noises grow loud. You will drink bad coffee and better coffee, and you will keep a notebook. At the end, you will hand me 10 things we can fix that do not cost a fortune, and 3 that do, but are worth it. And Caleb swallowed hard because it sounded both like a test and a gift, and he nodded. I'll be here, he said, and for once he did not ask if there was another way. Alma appeared with a small tray, 2 mugs, and a clay teapot that steamed with mint. For our elevator guests, she said. And for you, a note from Miss Patel. She left a draft term sheet. She says your healthcare covenant is in. And Julius scanned the neat lines, saw the clauses that mattered, and said, good, we will sign Tuesday if nothing else hides in the margins. And Alma grinned because she respected a man who read all the way to the bottom before he blessed a thing. The door opened again, and Elena from events peeked in. We placed the dock mat and pulled the insoles from stores. Carts arrive Thursday. Tomas says thank you. And Julius nodded. Thank you for moving fast. And Alina, who had been taught to whisper good news as quickly as bad news, smiled and slid away. Miranda touched the deed envelope and then pushed it gently back to Julius. Keep it for now, she said. Bring it on the day I have earned it by being kinder for a while. And Julius considered and then tucked it back into his jacket, not as punishment, but as a new kind of promise. He stood and said, come see the terrace, and led them out to the long balcony where Austin spread in lights and low clouds and the sound of late traffic mixed with faint laughter from the street. The air smelled like rain that had not yet started. They leaned on the rail, the 3 of them quiet in a way that did not feel empty. Miranda spoke first. I will call my sister and tell her I was wrong, she said, and Julius said, better. Invite her for breakfast downstairs. Learn Lila's name and Diego's, and let the room teach her too. And Miranda nodded like a student given homework that might save her. Caleb, looking out over the city, said, I'll tell my friends I lied. And Julius said, tell them you learned. Then show them by how you tip, how you speak, how you wait. And Caleb nodded again because he could feel how action makes words true. A breeze moved across the terrace, stirred Miranda's shawl, and rattled a fern in its brass pot. Down below, Ramos guided an older couple toward the exit with a gentle hand on the air, not touching, only suggesting, and Julius felt a pride that did not puff. It settled. He turned to go back in and saw Chef at the far end of the mezzanine, leaning against a column, laughing softly with a line cook, relief on her face now that the last plate was scrubbed and the last pan cooled. Julius raised a hand to her, and she returned it with 2 fingers, a small salute. He walked them back inside, stopped at his office door, and opened it so they could see where his days often ended. Walnut shelves with binders labeled by buildings, photographs of half-built frames under Texas sun, a pegboard with a dozen keys no one would guess the use of, a window that framed the hotel sign's blue glow like a painting. He sat at the small table, not the big desk, because that was where he held talks that mattered, and motioned for them to sit. Tomorrow, he said, you 2 will arrive at 10 at night. Alma will show you the time clock. You will sign in like everyone else. You will wear flats and bring patience. And Miranda laughed unexpectedly, a real laugh. Flats, she said. I have some from a long time ago. And the 3 of them smiled at the same memory of a younger night when money was thin and love was thick. Julius put a pen on the table in front of Caleb. Write a list now while the names are fresh, he said, and Caleb wrote, Rosa, lighter carts, Tomas, dockmat, Diego, insoles and a stool, and then added 2 more on his own. Alma, extra night clerk on festival weekends. Lila, more training hours to qualify for the supervisor test. Julius watched the list form and felt the right kind of tired, the kind that comes when a day has been used well. A soft knock came at the door and Ramos stepped in, hat in hand like a sheriff in an old movie. Night crew is released on time. Elevators are green. Engineering will do a full check at 6. The floor is yours, Mr. Lane. And Julius stood and shook his hand because he believed in shaking the hands that hold the house up. Good work, Chief, he said, and Ramos gave a nod that said the words had landed where they were meant to. As Julius walked Miranda and Caleb back toward the lift, the building gave one last easy sigh, the kind a place makes when it knows it has done its job for the night. Outside, the first drops of rain began to tick the railing, and inside, the scent of cedar and citrus held steady, like a promise that the rooms would be ready again tomorrow. And the mystery of the day did not feel like mystery anymore. It felt like a map with a path they were finally willing to walk together. Julius let the rain tick the terrace rail a little longer, and then checked the wall clock, because the night work always began on time. He walked Miranda and Caleb to the lift, rode down to the lobby, and stood with them at the blue quartz desk, while Alma closed the early shift drawer and opened the night ledger with a clean, practiced motion. Tomorrow you start at 10, Julius had said. But he could feel the building asking for a small promise now, so he told Alma, walk them through the list tonight for an hour. And Alma nodded, already pulling 2 blank name badges and a small flashlight from the drawer. Miranda clipped the badge to her shawl with an awkward smile that made Lila, the server from earlier, grin back as if sharing a secret. Caleb took the little flashlight and the pen-like tools he did not yet know how to use. Outside, thunder rolled deeper, and the first bus of late arrivals pulled up to the awning size, a group of tired teachers whose flight had been delayed in Dallas. The driver opened the luggage bay and sighed. The glass doors whooshed. The lobby breathed, and the teachers came in with that forward tilt of people who have been traveling too long. Alma called for warm towels. Lila brought a tray, and Miranda, without anyone telling her to, stepped close and offered a towel to a woman with red eyes and a knot in her shoulder. Welcome, she said, quiet and human, and the woman's face loosened enough to accept help. Caleb followed Ramos to the back to check the dock mat and returned, wet up to the ankle, saying, the new mat works. The slope still runs water toward Bay 2. And Julius said, note it. We will add a lip. And Caleb wrote it down, surprised that the fix sounded like something a person could do with a tape measure and a day of work. Lightning flashed white across the lobby windows. The lights dipped, and in the clean half-second before the generator took the load, the building held its breath like a diver. Then the soft hum steadied. Lamps returned. The front desk screens blinked once and settled, and the pianist, who had been packing up, played 2 calm chords for the joke of it. A couple near the bar clapped, nervous laughter rose, and Ramos's radio clicked with engineering's calm voice. All systems on Gen, grid expected back in 20, elevators 1 and 3 on, 2 held out of service, all good. And Julius said into the radio, thank you, do a floor walk on 9 and 10 for reassurance, because small things keep big things calm. A man in a sharp suit stepped toward the desk with a smile too quick and a folder too glossy. Chairman Lane, I can have an emergency line of credit, he began, and Ramos was already there, hand open like a gate. Sir, the chairman is with guests, Tuesday at 10, and the man, who was not unkind, nodded and left the folder with Alma, like a person placing a letter on a hall table. The teachers checked in, accepted cookies, and drifted toward the lifts with warm shoulders. Miranda watched the desk crew move, the way Alma's left hand counted room keys while her right checked IDs, the way the valet shook rain from his jacket only after he stepped away from the guests, the way Lila crossed the lobby with a tray as if she had done this her whole life. It is like a river, Miranda said softly, more to herself than to anyone else, and Julius answered, a river with banks, and tapped the binder that held the night SOPs. Caleb leaned over the binder, reading a page about storm protocols, and said, this is not fancy. And Julius said, that is why it works. And the words landed in Caleb's chest like a weight he was willing to carry. Thunder rolled again. Deeper now, and a tipsy man in a wedding suit wandered in from the awning, phone to his ear, voice sharp with the courage of liquor. "Room now, I'm important," he said to no one in particular, then pointed at Leela like she was furniture, and Ramos moved as a shadow moves, appearing at the man's side with the right mix of warmth and steel. "Sir, we will get you settled," he said. "First, let me help you stand still." And in 30 seconds the tone lowered, the phone went into a pocket, and the man's shoulders dropped. Julius watched for a beat and then said to Alma, "Send 2 bottles of water and a plate to his room. Charge the room for 1 water. Kindness with a boundary." And Alma wrote it down without asking why, because she understood the rule. Help people do better, but do not teach them that misbehavior is a shortcut to free things. The grid came back with a soft flick, engineering confirmed, and the building exhaled again. In the quiet after storm, Julius walked Miranda and Caleb into the small staff break room so they could see where the night really breathes. The corkboard held new photos now: Rosa's nephew at graduation, Diego's sister in her nursing scrubs, and the whiteboard showed Alma's fresh list. Doc Lip, Carts Thurs, insoles stocked, festival weekend extra clerk, training hours Lila. Okay. Miranda touched the corner of the whiteboard with her fingertip as if feeling for a pulse, then picked up the eraser that had fallen on the floor and put it back on the ledge. Caleb took a slip-resistant shoe from a shelf and read the tag, then looked down at his shiny dress shoes as if they were a foreign language. "Stores can charge these to training," Alma said, and handed him a pair in his size without making a fuss. He swapped shoes right there, scuffing the heel, and when he stood, he looked taller because he looked steadier. Julius wrote a short note in thick black marker and pinned it to the board in English and Spanish. "From the chairman. Thank you for carrying the house through the storm. 3 changes start now. Lighter carts on 12, Doc Lip at Bay 2, insoles stocked nightly. This week only, night meal voucher for closing crew if bus is late, J." And he added a small smile line that looked almost like a check mark. Miranda watched him write and said, "You could have sent an email." And Julius said, "Paper at eye level gets read at 3 a.m., and she nodded because she finally believed him without needing to see proof. Caleb's phone buzzed again on the break room table, a friend asking if he was still coming to a private club. He typed, erased, typed again, then put the phone face down and said, "Not tonight," mostly to himself. They walked back to the lobby and found the teachers clustered near the window, watching the rain fade to a soft mist. One of them recognized Miranda from earlier and called, "Thank you," in a tired voice that carried more weight than a long speech, and Miranda said, "You're welcome," without a flourish, and then added, "Rosa set your rooms. She cares about pillows." And the teacher laughed through her nose, surprised by the detail, and said she would leave a note for Rosa at checkout. Julius checked the clock again. It was near midnight. He looked at his family and made the choice he had planned to make tomorrow, but felt right now. "Sign the book," he told them, and Alma slid the big ledger across the desk. Miranda and Caleb wrote their names under Night Shadow, the letters careful and new. "Backpacks tomorrow," Alma said like a teacher telling students to bring pencils, and Caleb laughed once, quick and real. Julius shook Ramos's hand, then Alma's, then Lila's, then the valet's, saying each name again as if tying a knot so it would hold. He walked Miranda and Caleb to the door and stood with them under the awning, watching the water drip from the edge in silver threads, and he felt the tired that means a day was used well. The city smelled like clean concrete and wet oak. Taxis slid by, their tires whispering. "I was wrong about what made me look strong," Miranda said suddenly, eyes still on the street. "It is not a table full of names. It is standing beside people who do the work and learning their names." And Julia said, "That is a good sentence. Keep it," and she nodded. Caleb looked at his father, at the hotel, at the small river of light spilling onto the wet sidewalk, and said, "See you at 10." And Julius answered, "On time," because time is the first respect. They stepped into the night, and Julius stayed a moment longer under the blue glow of his sign, listening to the building's heart. Boilers humming low, ice machines ticking, late laughter drifting from the bar. And he felt that quiet mystery again, not about secrets, but about how a place becomes a home for strangers when the people inside choose, hour after hour, to make it so. He turned back through the doors and the lobby greeted him with the soft scent of cedar and citrus, as if saying, ready for the next thing. By morning, the storm had rinsed the city clean, and by night, the plan they had written on the ledger began to live its life. At 9:45 p.m., Miranda and Caleb came in early with small backpacks, flat shoes, and the careful eagerness of people who want to do it right. And Alma clipped name badges to their shirts and handed them a folded route card that read, Night Walk 1, Lobby, Housekeeping, Dock, Engineering, Floors 9 to 12, Mezzanine. Then looked at Julius as if to say this would matter if they kept showing up. They did, and the first hour showed them the slow river of night work as it bends around guests who arrive sleepy, around machines that breathe in cycles, and around people who have learned how to keep a building gentle at 2 a.m. Monday, they shadowed Rosa and learned how she sets a table so no one bumps a glass during a toast, how she tests the weight of a cart with her hip before a long push, and how a quiet buenas noches can ease a hard hour. Tuesday noon, Julius met Miss Patel as promised, read the last line of the term sheet himself, signed for a refinance that protected healthcare in rough months, shook her hand, and sent a copy to HR with a note that said, "This one keeps doctors in reach." Then returned to the mezzanine by dinner to tell Chef that Autumn's menu could carry a little more risk because the staff would be steadier. That same afternoon, the Anderson firm brought their rent roll and learned that fair terms come with clear expectations. And Julius told them to keep the cleaning contract on site instead of outsourcing because the building breathes better that way. And they nodded because they had never thought of a lobby as something that breathes. Tuesday night, Caleb carried ice and slipped once on a damp patch near the ballroom. He did not curse or look for someone to blame. He said "Lo siento" to the porter who steadied him and wrote "Add Matt" by ballroom bin on his card. Wednesday morning by 9, the dock lip was bolted in place, and Tomas gave a thumbs up from a ladder while rainwater curled away from Bay 2. Wednesday night, Miranda worked the lobby with Lila and learned the calm rhythm of check-in questions, the way to hold back a line cutter without making a scene, and the way a warm towel can rescue a face that is about to break. She also caught herself before a joke could turn sharp and instead asked a guest if she needed water. And later, she sat in the break room and wrote 2 short notes on hotel stationery, one to Rosa, one to Diego, thanking them by name for specific things. And Alma pinned them to the corkboard at eye level. Thursday, the lighter carts came to floor 12, and Rosa pushed one, then stopped and put her hand on the handle with a look Julius understood very well. This small mercy would add up over hundreds of turns, and Alma marked the cart's Thurs box with a neat check. That afternoon, Mr. Harrison from Republic Bank kept his Tuesday slot, brought an honest face, talked about a loan the hotel did not need and a partnership it might, and Julius told him what he tells all bankers he keeps. I will pay on time. I will not hide. I will not cut people to make your quarter look better. And Mr. Harrison nodded because boundaries save time. Friday night, the festival crowd swelled and Alma's extra clerk stood at the desk with new nerves, and Miranda slid behind her shoulder and whispered good steps in the right order. And the girls smiled after the third guest because steps take, then smooth. Caleb rode the service elevator alone for the first time, with a mop bucket, a stack of clean glassware, and the slow courage of someone who has chosen to be useful. He found Diego in the dish pit, learned how steam fogs a face shield, and how a loud room can get very quiet inside a person's head. Then wrote "stool between rushes" and set it under the table himself without asking for a budget. Saturday morning, Julius met Ramos and engineering in the machine room for a drill they would make real. A stuck elevator, a calm voice, a steady open, because practice turns panic into a task. Saturday afternoon, Miranda invited her sister to breakfast downstairs, said Lila's name first, asked about the coffee, and did not mention money once. When her sister tried to fish with a joke about coupons, Miranda smiled and said, "Let me introduce you to the woman who keeps this floor straight," and walked her to Rosa. Saturday night, Caleb returned from his 2 a.m. break with a paper cup of hot coffee for Miss Porter, the housekeeper from his prom night. He said, "I was rude then. I am sorry," and she looked surprised and pleased and told him to keep his grades up even if he was not in school anymore, which made him laugh. By Sunday evening, the whiteboard in the break room was a neat field of check marks: dock lip, carts, insoles stocked, extra clerk, training hours for Lila, ballroom mat, late bus meal vouchers used twice by 2 dishwashers who smiled like men with a small win in their pockets. Alma taped a letter from the group of teachers under the list, a thank you written in blue ink that said someone had finally slept well after a bad week and that cookies at midnight should be the law. Julius read it twice and left it where the night crew would see. That same Sunday, he met Caleb at the small office table with the notebook they had promised. 10 fixes that do not cost a fortune, 3 that do but are worth it, and the list made sense. Heavier door closers on 2 service doors that slam, felt pads under glass racks on the mezzanine to cut the small high noise, a second ice bin near the ballroom to bleed pressure, better radio batteries that hold charge through a double shift, a standing desk option at the front for backs, and 3 big ones: sound dampening on 12, water softening on the upper floors to save towels and hands, and a night shuttle a few blocks on festival weekends. Julius nodded through each item, said, yes, yes, test it, pilot it, price it. And by the time they were done, Caleb's face had the tired light Julius remembered from his own good years. Miranda came in carrying 2 cups and a plate of shortbread, and she set them down like a peace offering that had nothing to do with surrender and everything to do with choosing to stay. The sun went down clean, and at the blue hour, Julius stood with them on the terrace and finally took the heavy envelope from his jacket, not as a trump card or a test, but as a mark in the ledger of their week, and placed it in Miranda's hands. Now, he said, because you changed what you praise. And she did not cry or make a speech. She simply nodded and said, we will plant live oaks. And he felt something unclench in the middle of his chest. Ramos stepped out to tell him the night crew was clocked in. The lobby was calm, and engineering had a quiet board. And Julius shook his hand because that is how men mark the end of a good day. Downstairs, Alma had already lined up ride vouchers behind the desk. The pianist had left a note that he wanted to donate a late set on Fridays for staff. And Chef Martinez had pinned a draft of the autumn menu beside the whiteboard with a scribble at the top: keep the rooms honest. Julius walked the mezzanine one last time, glanced into his office where the photos of half-built frames reminded him that good things look ugly halfway through, turned off the lamp, and headed for the lift. In the lobby, guests moved through soft light. The air carried cedar and citrus, and the blue quartz desk held steady under friendly elbows. He stopped by the front to tell Alma, everything we promised, we keep. And she said, yes, sir, with a smile that said she had already started. He shook Lila's hand again, called Rosa and Diego by name across the floor, and watched Caleb say goodnight to Ramos with the respect a student gives a teacher he has finally chosen. Outside, the sky over Austin was a deep, clear color that gave the hotel its name, and the sign threw its calm blue across the sidewalk like a path. Julius stood under it for a breath and let the week set in his bones. A door blocked, a truth said, a building that had held them while they changed, and a family that now understood where strength actually lives. He went back through the doors, and the hotel answered him the way a well-kept house answers its keeper, with steady light, with ready hands, with the quiet mystery of work done right and no need to hide.